All right, everybody. So we'll go through a longer section here, part two. We'll probably just go to the end of this module. So we have the source of play, and then we now have the source of playwrights, the actual people. Playwrights are frequently come from the theater. They're people of the theater, grew up with it, did it when they were younger, studied it. People of the theater, theater-wise. For instance, Moliere wrote as a vehicle for himself and his troupe. He was a writer of theater because he did theater. Shakespeare wrote for himself and the actors in his company, understood the actor's strength. Again, he came from the theater, wasn't an outsider. And Moises Kaufman writes in collaboration with this company. Some playwrights do start from outside the theater, didn't do it either in high school or college or any of that stuff. They were writers in their own rights, writing novels, fiction, nonfiction, poems, short stories, that kind of thing, and then found their way to the theater. Some were actors, let's say, or rather were from the outside the theater, just started to write. Not theater-wise, may write in new and refreshing ways, up in the current theatrical status quo. So those are the main things that they can do. They bring in new energy, new ideas, new proposals, new ways of writing. So it always has a little bit of a change. For instance, Margaret Edson was a kindergarten teacher in Atlanta and won a Pulitzer Prize-winning play Wit in 1995. And then Anton Chekhov, a very famous writer of the theater, was a doctor. He was a physician in Russia and is still considered one of the best playwrights of all time. He was one of the first people to kind of write human psychology into plays. Now into training playwrights. The training is unlike actors, directors, and designers. They may go to structured programs, university degrees, take courses, graduate schools like you are now. They take courses in playwriting. We have a playwriting course here, actually, next semester. So they may do that. Playwriting as an academic discipline produces results rather than compelling action. So sometimes playwrights that go to playwriting school have kind of a myopic vision of what playwriting can be, not as maybe exciting in their ideas. When you're training playwrights, though, many playwrights just follow simple rules. Write what you know. You've probably heard that before. It's a pretty interesting adage. Write for your own time. Write action, not speeches. Write for actors, not readers. Be passionate, not timid. Truthful, not nice. So a big one there is write action, not speeches. We talked about this before in the first part of this module, that playwrights just write dialogue, and dialogue is just action. Every sentence, every argument, every word moves the action forward. And they write for actors as well. That's a big thing. They write dialogue that sounds like people are talking to each other rather than like we saw in the first prose version that Hemingway wrote, where it's stilted, it's beautiful language, but it's not dialogue. It's not people talking to each other. You're reading a novel. Many playwrights actually make income from other sources, writing for television and film, teaching at colleges and universities. So the process of getting in production into reality. So let's say you've written a play, and now you're trying to get it produced. Plays written by playwrights. Sometimes they're commissioned by a theater, or you're just writing it on your own, hoping somebody will pay for it to be produced. The play is always workshopped. Rarely do plays, actually never. Plays are just written and then somebody produces it. There's always a workshop where actors and directors come in and they work on the piece, and the writer, keeps rewriting it, refining it. Then the play may get produced. You have all the things we talk about in making theater. Today we have regional theaters, off-Broadway, Broadway, just depends on what it is, where they get it produced. Let's go from the page to the stage, professional issues, writing the play. So as we talked about before, plays can begin from anything. The genesis of plays, a story ever heard, a chance remark, history, slice of life. A lot of adaptations are happening right now. There's this wonderful playwright named Kate Hamill, who has adapted most of Jane Austen's work, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Dracula. So Genesis, ideas, the leap comes from anywhere. How do you go from the leap to the play itself? And that goes back to the playwright's process. Character will answer what kind of people are doing these things. Language will help find character. How do they speak? Action will answer what do they do, not what do they say. And story will answer the beginning, middle, and end. So every playwright has their own process, and sometimes characters are the things that make the story jump off the page. Sometimes language will help them find the play, and sometimes action will help them find the play. Playwriting is an act of imagination. And again, much of the work is dialogue. Playwrights have to be masters of the spoken language, and the language of play carries a huge burden, meaning the words, but also character, tempo, and action. And finally, when they're finishing the draft, typically, as we said just a second ago, moves into a workshop process with the director and actors in a space, almost like a rehearsal. It is a rehearsal for the playwright to kind of see what their play sounds like and looks like outside of their own brain. As we talked about earlier, a lot of playwrights work on their own, and so they have those characters speaking in their own mind. So it's always wonderful to have actors bring their own personalities, their own voices to the process so that the playwright can hear it. And the plays continually change until it's on stage. Even then it will change even more. So when you get to your rehearsal process for a production, playwright's usually there, and they'll still keep rewriting it and refining it even once you go through your first preview or so. Playwrights, when they're thinking about audience, typically playwrights try not to think about what the audience will think, if it's good or bad. If you start doing that, then you're writing not the truth of the story that you started, but rather what you think an audience will like. Questions of truth and action should be more important. The reality is that audience is the ultimate barometer of good or bad. So that's the catch-22. Playwrights can't really think about what the audience will think of it, either good or bad, but ultimately the audience is the barometer of if it is good or bad. So as in any profession, you have to deal with the yin and the yang of these things. They establish the laws of drama. Getting the play produced, the number of theaters in which plays can be produced in the U.S. has increased, notably not-for-profit theaters. These are what we talked about as off-Broadway theaters, theater companies, regional theaters are all not-for-profit. The Alley Theater here in Houston, not-for-profit. Organizations can give first productions to a wide spectrum of scripts, many of which are later produced elsewhere. One of those places is the National Playwrights Conference at the O'Neill. So for most playwrights, Broadway remains the goal. Not only do you, as it says here, get more money for the rights, and let's say you win a Tony or something like that, you get status, it's also where you can probably get the best budgets for your productions. The play can get fully realized in the way that you want it to be, but the royalties are higher than anywhere else, and again, the production is subject to better designers and all that kind of stuff. Plays are not produced by theaters by accident. Most of them are submitted to regional theaters or Broadway or off-Broadway producers by agents. So playwrights have agents as well. When they have a play that's not been commissioned, they'll submit the plays to theaters and producers, just as actors will be submitted to the casting directors, as we talked about in the first module. The playwright's first hurdle is finding its first production. Now, playwrights do get paid, but it's a standard Broadway contract gives a playwright a percentage of the theater's weekly gross. The percentage climbs as the gross climbs. So let's say Wicked, which we all know. Stephen Schwartz, for the last 22 years, has been getting a percentage of every weekly gross of Broadway. So he's doing pretty well. So that's what you want. You want to hit. These figures can be impressive, thousands of dollars a week. On a flop, you get nothing. So we're talking about Spider-Man in the Dark. Fortunately, the writers of that haven't made a lot of money. Potential for television and film sales as well, as Wicked is coming out soon. This year, I think it's in Thanksgiving, is that what it is? So that's always a possibility for a play that's either a hit or not. And then you can also get royalties from regional theaters. The Alley Theater will do a play that was done on Broadway a few years ago or 10 years ago, and the playwright still gets money from that production. Which leads to this. Rights are handled by two organizations, Dramatists Play Service, same with French, and Concord Theatrics. They collect royalties on productions for the lives of the play's copyright. The copyright is the author's life plus 50 years or 75 years, depending on the actual copyright. The royalty on a single performance can be small, but the collective royalties per year on a play that is popular can be large. The playwright's career, it's an artist's career, right? There's no guarantees of production, money. Once a playwright gets started and has some productions, the way forward isn't necessarily clear or easy. It's not a linear path. It's not because you got one produced, you're going to get all your plays produced. Unfortunately, even the best playwrights don't have everything produced. Just because you write something doesn't mean that a theater wants to do it, unfortunately. Playwriting is a difficult craft that requires talent and hard work and perseverance. It's made difficult by the conditions under which plays are produced, which we just talked about. A recent study found that only 15% of income is from royalties. Many playwrights move to television and film, where you get paid more. The writer's strike, that was what that was about AI coming in and writing a lot of television and film scripts. So it's a volatile industry right now, and relatively few people make a living as playwrights. Not to be down on it, but the realities of playwriting and playwrights is no guarantee. It's like acting, directing, all these different disciplines of art. Painters, dancers, singers. There's no guarantees of consistent wages, performances, getting hired. But they do it for the passion of it, because they love it and they need to do it. So here are the practical pieces: situation, it's rough ideas of setting, social level relationships, tone, it's comic or serious, plot, and then form. These are all in the reading that we'll go over in the next module. And then watch these videos below for some of the questions on the quiz.